who would you like to walk with on this earth? Who would you like to walk with as someone that maybe you admire? But wait a second, these are just people. These are just men. We are just men. Is there someone that would like to walk with you? But think of this. Noach walked with Elohim. Now that is big. That is big. And for Elohim to allow him to walk with him, that's even bigger. Do you walk with Elohim? Does Elohim walk with you? He walked with Adam in the cool of the day. I could just see Adam and Elohim walking hand in hand, Middle Eastern style. Because in the Middle East, the men will lock your hands. You know, just like, you know, schoolgirls do. You know how schoolgirls, they used to. I guess now you want to be careful. But in the olden days, how many of you girls used to lock hands, you know, at school? And in the Middle East, the men still lock their hands with you. But I could just see Adam and Elohim walking in the cool of the day, and Adonai just sharing things with him, teaching him. Until one day where Adam didn't show up for the meeting, and he was behind the bush. But Noach walked with Elohim. Noach became the father, this is the Toldot, of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so Noah, a tzaddik, a righteous man, a man of integrity among all those people, he was the father of 3 sons. Go with me for a moment here. Keep your finger here or put a little, and go with me to the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews. And in Hebrews chapter 11, Hebrews chapter 11 is, I guess, what we would call the Hall of Faith. Not the Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Faith. You know, it doesn't matter whose stars are in the walk of shame nowadays in Hollywood. Anybody been to Hollywood, to the walk of stars where the stars are? And you put, I'm standing right. When I lived over there, I got to stand in the star of Mickey Rooney and some of these other guys that I really liked. But that was for men. But this is the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Faith. Go to verse 7 with me. It says there, it was through his faith, through his what? Faith. Now notice, Adonai sees him as a man of righteousness, or righteous, a tzaddik, a man of integrity among his contemporaries. But the reason he was that is, first of all, he was a man of faith. It was through his faith that Noach, when he had been warned by Elohim of something that had never been seen before. Now let's stop there. Adonai is going to tell Noach that it's going to rain. It had never rained before. Remember what chapter 2 says? That the garden and the rest of the world, there was a division among the first world of Adam, the division of the rest of the world and the division of the garden. And he created all the world in chapter 1. But in chapter 2, he creates a special place called the Gan Eden, the Garden of Paradise, the Garden of Eden, paradise. And there where he placed man, it says a mist watered. And he had divided between the waters above and the waters below. And the earth before the flood was a greenhouse. The earth before the flood had just roving mountains and valleys and springs of water and one ocean, and it was one giant continent. And there was waters above the atmosphere. There was this, we were covered, the earth was covered with a water canopy. And when the sun came in, it was like a greenhouse effect. And so the whole world, think of this, the whole world was green. What we know as North and South Poles, they were green. The whole world was green. And a mist, just like having a mister, kept it all green. It had never rained before. And so Adonai says to Noach, it's going to rain. Rain? What's that? What do you mean rain? What do you mean water's going to fall from the sky? And he says, I'm going to destroy the earth, and the water's going to fall, and it's going to cause a flood, and it's going to cause a catastrophe. The Greek word in the Septuagint and in the New Covenant Scriptures that Yeshua and Paul use is the Greek word kataklysmos. There's going to be a kataklysmos coming, a cataclysm, a destruction event. That's what the word flood means. The word flood means a cataclysm. In fact, this is the only place, only with Noah's flood is this Hebrew word, menasah, is that word ever used. It's not used for local floods. It's not used for when the Nile flooded or when rivers flooded. That word is only used for Noah's flood. And it says there, it was by faith that Noah had been warned of Elohim of something that had never been done before. He felt a holy fear. By the way, a man of faith, a woman of faith, a person of integrity, a righteous one, always feels a holy fear about things. We feel that holy fear that we're going to displease the one that created us. And Noah had that fear. And he built an ark to save his family. He built the ark. Now think of it. You're in the middle of this place. It had never rained, never flooded, never, the rivers of the Garden of Eden flowed out of Eden and flowed around the known world at the time, the pre-flood world. But they had never caused a cataclysm. They had never, rain hadn't fallen. But when Adonai warned them that this is going to happen, He felt that holy fear. And Adonai says, I want you to build an ark, a teva. I want you build this ark, this box. And I want this box built so that you and the life that I've created will be saved. Now, he built a boat in the middle of where there's no boats. Now, I could see being a shipbuilder in the coastlines and bays and all, but you're in the middle of just like building a boat here. Can you imagine me, Adonai tell me to go to the top of the crest and build a boat? What do you mean build a boat? And especially with these dimensions, as we're going to see. But he did it anyway. See, that's what a man, a woman of Adonai does when Adonai tells you the impossible, even the illogical. The illogical and the impossible are possible and logical, reasonable with Adonai. You just have to hang on to his reasoning, to his way of speaking and doing things. And so it goes on to say, here in verse, I'm in Thessalonians, how did I get there? Hebrews chapter 11. It says there, to save his family. By his faith, the world was convicted. So when Noah spoke to his contemporaries and told them, they asked him, what are you doing? I'm building a boat. Why are you building a boat? Because water's going to fall from the sky. The sky is falling in a sense. And the water that's in the sky and the waters that are under the earth are going to come up, and it's going to flood the earth, and everyone is going to die. Can you imagine what they thought of him? They laughed at him. But by his faith, by his determined faith, by him saying, I will believe what Adonai says, I will not believe what I see, hear, feel around me. I will not believe that. I will believe what Adonai says. Because of that, they were convicted. You see, when we stand up for what we believe, they might laugh at us. Always remember this. Always have the guts to tell people not only what you believe, but why you believe it, even if they laugh at you. You see, because people laugh at you in a crowd. People laugh at you outwardly. But I want you to know something about people, because we're all like this. What happens after we laugh at people or get upset at people, and then we go home? We go home and we go to bed. And for some reason, I don't know why this is, but everybody says this. 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and you're convicted by what you did. You see, they might laugh at you. They might get all upset. You know, they might say you're crazy. But what you said, because remember, we're not talking about normal life without Elohim, without the Ruach. When they go to bed, the Ruach will use the words you said, especially Scripture, to convict them. Your faith even now convicts people. What you believe, you know, your faith convicts even family members, friends. That's why when you become a believer, or when you become a stronger believer, have you noticed that people don't like to hang around with you? They don't like to walk with you anymore. You've been walking with Adonai so much that Adonai's ways are rubbing off on you. So therefore, now these guys that like to walk with you or bar with you or whatever with you don't want to anymore because your faith is convicting them. Your faith, what you believe, what you've told them, convicts them. That's what was going on here. It was by his faith that the world, think of it, the world, the known world at the time. Because from Adam to Noah, the world had multiplied and had been fruitful. And he was able to claim. Now, this next verse is of vital importance for believers. He was able to claim. Let me ask you, can you claim this? Can you claim this? He was able to claim the righteousness which is the reward of faith. He was able to claim the righteousness, right standing with, say, he was righteous. The word righteousness means right standing. When you're a righteous man, you're in right standing with Adonai. And that'd be the question for everyone right now. And just think of it. You don't have to raise your hands so that the guilty will be known to everybody. Where's your righteousness, or how's your righteousness? Are you in right standing with Adonai right now? Are you in right standing with Adonai? Is there anything that he has against you? If there's anything that he has against you, you're not in right standings. A righteous man, a righteous woman is in right standing with Adonai. But where does that right standing come? Notice what it doesn't say also. It doesn't say he was able to claim the righteousness which is the reward of works. Which is the reward of what? Works. In fact, much of religion is righteousness by works. We call that works righteousness. How are we made righteous? To most people, a righteous man, a righteous person is because I do good works. I never hurt no one. Oh, he's a good, righteous person. Why? Oh, he would give his shirt off his back to anybody. That's works. Notice that when people usually think of a good person, they think of what they do. What works they do? Oh, he prays a lot. Oh, es un santito. Oh, siempre anda con la Biblia. You know. But it's not righteousness as a reward of works. It's righteousness as a reward of faith. It is faith. Now think of it. This is how everybody is saved. From Adam to the last person that will always be born, it will always be grace through faith. In fact, it says Noah found chen in the eyes of Adonai. He found what? Chen. Chen is grace. He found favor. He found chen. Favor with Adonai. Salvation is always grace through faith. Adonai extends his grace. We extend our faith. Salvation is when the hand of grace of Adonai and the hand of faith of man clasp. That's salvation. That's how simple it is. Think of it. It's so simple. Adonai reaches his hand down to you and you reach your hand up to him. That's salvation. Simple. And over here, Abraham faithed. In fact, in English it says, Abraham believed, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. But remember, to believe in Hebrew is not like in English. In English, we have a set of things we believe about. About. In fact, most churches have a doctrine of faith or a rule of faith, or this is what you must believe. An order. We believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in His Son, Jesus Christ. And again, a set of a credo, an I believe. You've probably heard of the Apostles' Creed. Mostly everybody, we've known the Apostles' Creed, either in Catholic or Protestant churches. I believe. Yo creo. I believe. Most people in America believe in God. Most people in America believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Most people in America believe that Jesus died for their sins. Most people in America believe that they are saved and are on their way to heaven. But the truth is, the majority of people in America are lost. If 90% believe all these things, but only 10% are saved, and you say, how could you say that? Well, those aren't my words, those are Yeshua's words. He says, wide, wide is the road, and wide is the door that leads to perdition. But narrow is the way, and narrow is the gate. And so the majority, even though they believe a set of standards, guidelines, it's not believing about God. It's not believing things about Jesus Christ. It's believing in Him and believing His word, that when He says do, don't do, we just, as His sheep of His pasture, say, okay. That's simple. He says Sabbath, okay. He says kosher, okay. He says these things, okay. It's your belief in Him, in you doing what He says, that is faith, not you doing the things. Because you could do all those things to get to heaven, but those things, doing those things, will not get you to heaven. Interesting, huh? But he believed. By faith, he faithed it. And one of the problems is that to us, we don't use the term, it's kind of hard in English to use the word faith, like to faith it, believe it, faith it. He faithed, faith, E-D, he faithed, he believed. But we have to believe in what he says. Abraham believed. Next week we're going to talk about that. Lech lecha, leave. He left. Build an ark. He built it because he obeyed what Adonai said. Believe, not just, well, I believe in you. I believe that that ark will save people. But no, he did it. Let's go back to Bereshit. And here it says, verse 11, The earth grew corrupt in the sight of Elohim. The earth grew corrupt in the sight of Elohim and was filled with Hamas. Everybody say Hamas. The word Hamas means violence. So the world was filled with what? Hamas. Why do you think this terrorist group Hamas likes to have that name? Because the terrorists like to terrorize. And if you use the name violence, to us it's just the name Hamas. But to them, violence. We are violence. We are the violent. And you do what we say or else you die. And most people will do what they say. They won't come against it because of fear. But the whole world was filled with violence. Think of not only, and Adonai has already divided the sons of the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth and the other brothers and sisters of Seth and Cain, because Cain, Abel, and Seth weren't the only ones. Adam and Eve had hundreds of kids, hundreds. And the world, as they were fruitful and multiplied, remember Adonai says, be fruitful and what? Multiply. So in multiplication, you multiply. Many of you know your times tables. I know all of them just like that. But they multiplied. And the sons of Seth and the other sons of Adam and Eve and the sons of Cain multiplied, but Adonai divided from the sons of Seth. He divided Noach. Noach was the only one that stood alone among all the contemporaries, even among the sons of Seth that were believers in Yahweh. In fact, it was to Seth and his son Enoch that they started calling the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh. So they became corrupt. And Elohim contemplated the earth. It was corrupt, for corrupt were the ways of all flesh on earth. And Adonai said to Noach, the end has come for all flesh. I have decided this because the earth is filled of violence of man's making, and I will efface them from the earth. I will efface them from the earth. He will kill everybody, destroy everybody, and leave a remnant of 8 people. A remnant of 8 people. 1 Peter 3:20. Peter echoes that. Saved only 8 people. Think of it. A remnant of 8. Adonai could use 8. He first started with 2 and then multiplied into the thousands. Now he's going to start with 8. Before we get into the story, one of the questions that is always asked is, when did the flood occur? One of the most important things, because we have grown up not with biblical standards. We have grown up not with the science of the Bible. Anybody know what the word science means? Who knows what science means? Knowledge. The word science means knowledge. Ciencia, tu senses, your knowledge, what you know. what is in this mind, what is in the combined mind of people. That's what science is. And there's biblical knowledge or biblical science, and there's also secular knowledge or secular science. And of course, Adonai, and I'm going to tell you something, I don't know if any of you know this, but I believe the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. I believe that everything in this book happened as it says it happened. There are many congregations, many churches that believe a combination of science, secular, and biblical science. Many of these, they call themselves theistic evolutionists. They believe that Elohim, Theos, that a theistic is someone who believes in Elohim, they're believers. But they believe that Adonai used evolution to create the world. But they still believe in Elohim. But they say that these stories, even among Jewish people, they say that these are just myths or stories. Much of secular and many religious organizations believe that. I got my bachelor's in theology from Roman Catholic school. It was, the theology was taught by priests, nuns, most of them ex-priests. The nuns were still serving, but many of the priests were ex-priests or priests that were no longer serving as priests. And what's interesting is that I was taught. Now, I knew the word before I went to college to get my bachelor's in theology. I knew the word. But they taught me, they taught the students that all these are myths. They say they're true, but they're not facts. They taught me Adam was not a real person, that's a story. Noah was not a real person, that's a story. The flood was just a myth. It was probably a local flood or something that happened, and they just wrote it down, and legend, as legends do, got away with it. No, that is not true. You've been taught that the world is 4.5 billion years old. That's what they teach in secular public schools and secular colleges. 4.5 million years, they say. The world is only 6,000 years old. Only 6,000 years old. It is not billions and billions and billions of years. It is only 6,000. The flood took place about 5,000 years ago. Almost 6,000 years ago at 3,000, around 3,000 BC. That is the date of the flood. About 3,000 BC. And it's interesting that with all the billions and billions, nobody could find material culture. No archaeologist, no anthropologist has found material culture older than 5,000 years old. More than 5,000 years old. And you say, well, what about carbon-14 dating? Well, what's it calibrated with? It's calibrated with material that is found 5,000 years ago, which is the oldest culture that has been found any place in the world. And material culture is something that man made. And is calibrated with a 5,000-year-old, the oldest thing that was ever found. And even Libby, the inventor of carbon-14 and all that data, claimed that anything over 2,000 years ago, it could have plus or minus several thousand years. So even the inventor did not put his stamp of approval on it, yet everybody uses carbon-14. But the world, the flood, took place about 3,000 before Messiah, before Yeshua was born. Yeshua believed in the flood, both in Mark and in Luke. It is recorded that Yeshua says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, what do we find out about the days of Noah? As it was in the days of Noah, what does it say? And the earth grew corrupt, and there was violence. Corruptness and violence. And by the way, I'm gonna say something here. I don't mean to scare people. I don't mean to scare you. I don't want to scare anybody. But preparation is always of importance. Let me tell you, the world is going to get more violent and more violent. The United States is going to get more violent and more violent and more violent. The more you have righteousness, the more there's opposition. Have you noticed that in your own life? Have you noticed that when you were in the world and you were in sin, yeah, there was problems came up, but what the heck? But have you noticed that when you become a believer, all of a sudden problems really get hard? Everything. Why? Because Satan hates you now. See, when you were buddies, when you were walking with Satan, hey, man, you guys, it was cool. He was cool with you, and you were cool with him. But once you stopped walking with him and you started walking with Yeshua, wait, he doesn't like you no more. And he doesn't like your friends. And he doesn't like what you're doing and how you're doing it. And he's going to do everything. Because remember, not only do we live in a world that is controlled and Adonai is sovereign, but we live in a world where Satan wants to abort everything that Adonai wants to do. It's very much like, as long as the rhinos were in power, the donkeys didn't have too much to say. But now that you got a lion in the White House, boy, these guys are mad. These guys are mad. Can you imagine that? Before, you know, former President Obama, former Secretary Clinton, former President, they could do whatever they want and, you know, say whatever they want, do whatever they want. And nobody cared. Now, this president says the smallest thing and everybody is up in arms. Can you imagine that? That's the way it is with Adonai. As long as we're friends with Hasatan, let me tell you, you're okay. But once you're friends with Adonai, once you're walking with Yeshua, he's going to come against you. The end has come. Make an ark. And so he gives the blueprint of the ark. And he tells them, this is how you make it with this kind of wood. In fact, he says the measurements, and I'm going to give the measurements in our modern, rather than cubits. But the measurements of the ark were 450 feet long. 450 feet long. 75 feet wide and 45 feet deep. Those are the same measurements that a modern seafaring vessel would have. Those are the same measurements. And remember, an ark is a box. It was a box, but it was a box that had to be seaworthy. It was a box that, if it was built as a square, it would be spinning around all the time. And if it was built differently, it would not be seaworthy. This is the most seaworthy sizes that any modern ship, whether it's a small ship or a large ship, these are the same dimensions that it should have as far as length, breadth, and depth that would make it seaworthy. How did Adonai know that? Because he invented the seas. He created the seas for a ship to be in. And think of this. This is in what we would call, what most people call today, prehistoric times. He built it. He told him to build 3 decks. And he told him all these directions. By the way, it was 75,700 square feet. 522. The other day, we were going to pray for someone. And as we went to go pray for that person, Mr. T, knowing Mr. T, you know Mr. T, right, Mrs. T, the way he is. We're driving down and a train passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then another train passed. And they started arguing, well, that has this much car, no, it had this. And Miguelito just kept on driving. They were counting stock cars in all these trains. Have you ever counted stock cars in the trains? As they're passing by, only someone from Santa Rosa would probably do that. Can you imagine? That's probably all they had to do in Santa Rosa. Count the trains that pass by. That was their pastime. 522 stock cars of space in 3 decks of the ark. Can you imagine that? I better get going here. And so he builds this ark. Now, verse 22 says, Noah did this. He did this all that Elohim had ordered him. That's faith. He built it according to faith. Adonai says, build it this way, and he built it that way. By the way, when Adonai says the life of man is going to be 120 years, that doesn't mean that the life of a person is 120 years. That means from this time to the flood, the earth is going to be 120 years. So it took Noah 120 years to build the ark. Can you imagine that? 120 years of working and building the ark. I'm sure he had helpers. I'm sure some of those guys, they were laughed as they were working for him, saying, this guy's nuts, but he pays well. And by the way, when we're talking about a flood, we're talking about a universal flood. Because there is some legends that talk about local floods. No, we're talking about universal flood. A universal flood. And a universal flood means that all around the world, it says to the highest mountains. Of course, there was no Mount Everest at the time. One of the things that scientists laugh at us is, it says, well, it was above Mount Everest. Where did all the water go? Well, yeah, but there was no Mount Everest. Did you know that there was before the flood, there was no Sandia Mountains? No Grand Canyon? No, nothing like that. fact, the Sandia Mountains, if you live on the east mountains of the Sandia Mountains, that was flatbed. That was the flat. And this side was underground. And what happened is after the flood, when the volcanoes and all that shifting came in, the Sandia Mountains, one side goes like this. So on the other side, on the east side, you have the slope. But on this side, you had the jagged. This mountain went like this. That's why you could find seashells on top of the Sandia Mountains. In fact, you could find seashells and fossils of fish in every high mountain, including Mount Everest. Including Mount Everest. Why? Because every known mountain today was just gentle hills and gentle valleys. And after the flood, the cataclysm of the flood, when the rains came down, for 40 days it rained, and the sluices from the deep opened up, and the continent, the original continent, the original landmass, because remember, he divided the land from the waters. So there was a landmass and a waters mass. And the landmass broke into what is continents today, and that's what started the continents from drifting. If you go to the coast of Africa and the coast of South America, you could actually see where they actually broke apart. And those sluices took off, and the oceans flattened, and there was areas that went down and areas that went up, and there was and by the way, the moment that the water started coming down, there was what we call an instant up north and down south, because the earth that before was in a greenhouse, now without the protection of that water above, all of a sudden instantly made the North and South Pole. And the North and South Pole were wider, bigger than they are today, and that's what people call the Ice Age. And you know all this thing about the snow melting up there? It's been melting for the last 6,000 years, 5,000 years from now. And all these things happen. Let's see. The flood was for 40 days. All life died. The water rose. The flood subsides. I want to get to some more stuff here in our teaching. By the way, Adonai says to take animals aboard the ark. He says take a couple of all the unclean animals, but take 7 pairs of the clean animals. Now think of that. He's supposed to take 7 of the clean, 2 of the unclean. Most of the time when you hear stories of this, they just say, 2 by 2, right? 2 by 2 of all the animals. Why is it that they never mention the clean animals and the unclean? Because you see, clean and unclean, Tahor and Tamai, don't come from the time of Moses. Because Adonai has always used the clean animals for sacrifice, and he knew that after the flood, he was going to give man meat to eat. So the meat that he gave Noah to eat was from what kind of animal? The clean animals. And when they disembark, go with me to verse 20 of chapter 8. Noah built an altar for Yahweh. This is after they disembark. and choosing from all the clean animals and all the clean birds, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. Can you imagine who taught Noah about offering clean on the altar? It says he did it. Adonai doesn't tell him. They knew it from the time of Adam, because Adonai sacrificed the first clean animal and Abel sacrificed a clean animal. Yahweh smelt the appeasing fragrance, and he said to himself, never again will I curse the earth because of man, because his heart contrives evil from his infancy. Can you imagine that? Adonai knows that the heart of man, as it says in Proverbs, the heart of man is desperately evil. Who could know its ways? Over here it says, he knows evil from his infancy. You remember our little kids when they were infant? Remember us or you guys when you guys were infants? Yeah. Yo quiero candy. Yo quiero cookies, cookies, cookies. That's the way they are, right? Right, Senor Freire? That's the way our children are. That's the way we were. Because since we're small, since we're little, we have that little wicked heart that comes to us as the result of Adam's sin. And that's what's going to bring death. In chapter 9, verse 1, 4,300 years ago, Elohim said to Noah and his sons, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. That's what he told Adam. Be the terror and dread of all wild beasts. Every living creature shall provide food for you, no less than the foliage of the plants. So he gives man. Now remember, they already knew what clean and unclean was. All the living creatures, knowing clean and unclean, shall be food, as well as the foliage of the plants. But remember, he's not talking about poison ivy, by the way. I know he doesn't mention don't eat the poison ivy, but you see, I believe that Adonai gave wisdom to Adam and these people. They weren't these caveman, Cro-Magnon Neanderthals out there. And then he says, with this exception, you must not eat flesh with life. You must not eat flesh with nefesh, with life, with soul. That is to say, blood in it. Your soul is in your blood. Your soul is in your blood. And you know, one of the things about, a lot of people always ask me about blood transfusions. Can we? Well, I disagree with having blood transfusions, because when you have blood transfusion, think of it, the soul of another person comes into you. Now, what about to save a life? Well, you could do that to save a life, but always remember, when you do get a blood transfusion, remember, another person's soul or life, their memory, their ways, their DNA structure becomes part of you. As long as you know that and are willing to even have people say, you've changed, because every time that someone gets a blood transfusion, for the years that I've been teaching about this, I always see changes. Some of them could be positive, some of them could be negative. Sometimes people that didn't smoke start smoking. People that didn't drink start drinking. People that drank don't stop smoking or drinking. Or other things. Just keep that in the back of your mind. I will demand an account of your life's blood, of your nephesh, of your soul in the blood. I will demand an account from every beast and from man. I will demand an account of every man's life from his fellow man. He who sheds man's blood shall have his blood shed by man. For in the image of Elohim man was made. This is the sacredness of life. One of the most important things that every one of us should hold is life is sacred. Life is sacred to Adonai and life is sacred to us. Why is life sacred? Because we are made in the image of Elohim. In his image, in his Selem, were we made. Therefore, Adonai says, whoever takes a life, his life should be taken. If you shed innocent blood, the blood of that person that goes into the ground starts crying out. There is a communication in the animal world, in the plant world, in the rock, dirt, soil world that we are not aware of. Did you know that rock's here? You see that rock that's right there? There's a rock in front of me. That rock is recording everything I say. Yeah, we have recorders out there, which are made of the same substance, by the way, in the tape. But that rock is listening to everything we say. Did you know that the heavens declare the glory of Yahweh? We don't hear it. It's another dimension, another something that... Did you know that the trees clap? The trees clap. We don't see them. We don't hear it. But there's a clapping that they do for Adonai. There's something about the soil of a country, the soil of a land. When you buy a house, when you buy property, dedicate that to Adonai and come against any blood that was ever shed there. And Adonai is going to demand, even from every beast, if an animal kills a man, Adonai is going to demand that beast's life. And if a man kills a man, murder, Adonai is going to demand that that man's life be taken. Capital punishment is one of the most biblical things that there should be, and yet today, the reason that there's all this, it's not a deterrent for others, it's a deterrent to the one who killed. And I know there's a lot of Christians and Jews and Messianics that don't believe in capital punishment. It's like saying, oh, I follow Adonai, but I don't believe in tithing. Oh, I don't believe... What do you mean lying? There's nothing wrong with lying. Oh, what do you mean murder? There's nothing wrong with murder. If you don't believe in capital punishment, then what you're saying is, I believe in murder. It's okay to be a murderer. Just give him 6 weeks here or a year over there. No, to Adonai, a life is so important. A life is so important that the person who kills should have his life taken. There is a new order to the world. Noah and his 3 sons repopulate the earth, the people of the earth. And there's another Toldot, chapter 11. I wish we could go through all these. Chapter Tower of Babel. Let's close with chapter 11, verse 27. These are Terah's descendants, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And so we go from Adam to Noah last week. Today we go from Noah to Abram. And this is part 1 of the book of Genesis. this has to do with every one of you here. Regardless of what color you are, regardless of what ethnic origin you are, what race you call yourself, chapter 1 through 11 is our common history. Chapter 1 through 11 is the history of mankind. Every person that is in this room, every person that you know, red and yellow, black and white, are in here. This is our story. Think of it. Your ancestors are in the Bible. Have you ever thought that? Your ancestors are in the Bible. Every atheist's ancestors are in the Bible. Every Hindu's ancestors are in the Bible. Every Muslim's ancestors are in the Bible. Every person that has ever lived or will ever live, their ancestors are in the Bible. Genesis 1 through 11. But over here, Adonai makes a separation. He cuts it. Today, in this, you have the origins of the Gentiles. The Gentiles, the word Gentile means the nations. And with the Tower of Babel split the world from the 70 descendants of Noah. Noah had 70 descendants from his 3 sons and their daughters and their wives, excuse me. There were 70 descendants. These 70 descendants became the original nations, Goyim, Gentiles, with their own particular languages. Before, the world was one language. And because of the Tower of Babel incident, when Nimrod decided to start a religion against Adonai, a religion where he could go to Adonai through his own works, the tower, Adonai divided the world. And what's interesting is every one of us, especially through our mothers, interestingly, the DNA structure of the mitochondrial DNA of you women is different than the Y structure of the men. Because the men are wanderers, we have male DNA everywhere of the same kind. But females, it's a little bit different. Because females have not been wanderers, they've only wandered with their husbands. We're able to trace that DNA structure. When I did my mom's DNA, it turned out she was B1T. B1T. That's her DNA signature. And I found that same B1T signature in many of the Pueblo women, especially the women from Jemez Pueblo. That means one of my mom's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmas on the mother's side was from there. And we found that same DNA structure in bones of women that had been found in some mounds in what is called Baja California, that whole area over there. And we found that same DNA structure in Hawaii. And we found that same DNA structure in Japan. And we found that same DNA structure in Mongolia. I even found one woman in Vietnam with my mom's specific signature. And then I found it in the Silk Road, and the last place it was in Babylon. Many women today in the Babylon area have the same signature that my mom has. That means that after the flood, a girl started walking east. Go east, young lady, go east. And of course, we're talking 6,000 years. They started walking. And of course, they left people there, and a daughter got married and went and went and went east and east and east. Finally got to Japan. At some point in time, somebody got a boat and took off. And you find some of them in Guam. You find it is definitely in the Hawaiian Islands. And at some point in Hawaii, they took off, got on another boat, and hit Baja. And from there, they came here. If you women do your DNA, you could actually follow your DNA structure, and almost everyone follows them to Babylon. We all came from Babylon, because that in Shinar region is where Noah came down after he got off the boat, went to Shinar, and Babylon was the first of the city-states. So technically, all our ancestors, male and female, except with the female we could trace it, come from where? From Babylon. But it's time that we get out of Babylon. We need to get out of Babylon. And that's what next week's study is, getting out of Babylon. Let's stand. Father, there's so much. We ask that you bless this time that we've had, that your Ruach HaKodesh could allow us to more and more just study. And next week's study is Lech Lecha. And we pray that we would be able to look at Lech Lecha and be able to see what you have for us. In Yeshua's name. Asa Yahweh panav elecha, vayasem lecha, shalom.